My mom laughed and asked, "When are you going to be someone like your brother?" Years later, I was thriving with my dream while my brother threw a tantrum because my parents couldn't afford his wedding. I'm 29 years old. If you'd asked me 10 years ago what my future looked like, I probably would have laughed and said something stupid like, hopefully not living in my parents' basement. I didn't have some grand vision back then. I wasn't one of those kids coding apps in middle school or building robots in the garage. I was just quiet observant. I liked taking things apart, seeing how they worked, tinkering along. My older brother Evan was the golden child. He always had the spotlight. Class president, football team captain, prom king, and later the one with the real job. He majored in finance, wore suits even to casual family dinners, and somehow always had a story ready that made everyone laugh. My parents, especially my mom, treated him like the second coming of Steve Jobs. Meanwhile, I was the quirky one, the weird one, the one who just needs to figure it out. Growing up in that house felt like constantly trying to prove you existed. Evan's picture was framed in every hallway. Mine. Maybe one, and it was cropped weirdly because my cousin had her eyes closed. When I got a B+ in physics, Dad would tell me, "Don't worry, not everyone's gifted." When Evan got a B+, it was, wow, that teacher must be brutal. It was subtle things, death by 1,000 dismissals. At first, I tried to keep up. I joined the robotics club thinking it might impress them. Mom said, "That's cute, sweetie. Just don't let it interfere with real responsibilities." When I landed a summer internship coding back-end systems for a local tech company, Dad shrugged and said, "So like IT support." The thing that really stuck with me, though, the one I replay more than I probably should, happened at a family barbecue 2 years after college. I had just started working on a passion project, a SaaS tool, meant to streamline virtual onboarding for remote teams. It was niche, yeah, but I believed in it. I mentioned it casually while flipping burgers at the grill, and my mom laughed. Actually laughed. "Steven," she said in front of my aunts and uncles, "be honest, when are you going to be someone like your brother?" I wish I'd said something cool in the moment, something sharp and clever that made her freeze, but I just blinked and turned the burgers, pretending the smoke was making my eyes water. That moment stung deeper than I thought it would, not because it was new. It wasn't, but because I finally realized that no matter what I did, I would always be a side character in my own family. It didn't matter that I'd been paying my own rent since college, that I was teaching myself every programming language I could find, that I spent nights in front of a laptop until my vision blurred. All they saw was Evan's tailored suits and $70 haircuts. All they talked about was how his boss gave him box seats to a Knicks game, how his fiancé came from good people, how his LinkedIn said VP of Client Relations. Meanwhile, I was still figuring things out. The kicker. That same summer, my parents sat me down like it was an intervention. We were in the living room, and I remember Dad folding his hands in that serious way he did whenever he wanted to talk down to you. Mom leaned forward like she was about to deliver tragic news. Evan sat smugly on the armrest with a beer in hand. "We've been talking," Dad said, "about your future." Mom chimed in, "You're not failing, Steven. We just think it's time you consider something stable." Stable. That word grated me. They meant a job with a salary cap and a ceiling low enough to keep me from dreaming. "Something like what Evan's doing?" Mom added gently, like I wasn't already bleeding from the comparison. I nodded, smiled, said I'd think about it, but something inside me snapped that day. It wasn't anger, not quite. It was colder, quieter, the kind of resolve that doesn't shout but whispers, "Watch me." So I stopped trying to prove anything to them. I didn't bring up work, didn't show them progress. I let them believe I was still muddling through freelance gigs and barely scraping by. But behind the scenes, things were happening. My software gained traction first with a few clients, then dozens, then companies were offering to license it. I stayed heads down, said no to investors focused on building it right, not fast. I lived like a monk, ramen and black coffee, cheap apartment, no distractions. I missed birthdays, skipped holidays, dodged family calls. Every hour they thought I was finding myself, I was building something that would change my life. Meanwhile, Evan was planning a wedding, a big one. Black tie, six-figure budget country club venue. My parents were footing the bill $60,000. I overheard Mom mention once like it was pocket change. "Well, we have to," she told my Aunt Evan's our firstborn. "He's done everything right." That line sat with me for days. I had launched my platform 2 months prior, and we had already hit $2.4 million in ARR. But sure, Evan had done everything right. Then came the wedding invitation. Actually, scratch that. It wasn't an invitation, it was a group text. My entire family, cousins, Uncles, great aunts, all in one massive thread, buzzing with excitement about Evan and Claire's big day. I was tagged like an afterthought. No personal message, no call. Just let us know if you can make it, Stephen, beneath a sea of champagne emojis. I stared at that message for a long time. Did I want to go? No. Did I feel obligated? Maybe. But part of me needed to see it, needed the confirmation that nothing had changed, that I still didn't belong, that they still saw me as a footnote to Evan's main story. And wow, did they deliver. I showed up in a basic black suit, no date, no fanfare, sat at a table near the back, you know, the one next to the speakers and the emergency exit. I watched as my parents beamed during the father-son dance, mom wiping tears, dad gripping Evan's shoulder like he was passing down a crown. They toasted him like he was royalty, said things like, "You've made us so proud and you've always been the light of our lives." I clinked glasses with a waiter who probably thought I was part of the catering team. But the real twist didn't come until the speeches. That's when Mom stood up, glass of champagne in hand, voice trembling with joy. "Some parents are lucky if one of their children finds success," she said, "but us. We hit the jackpot with Evan. From the moment he was born, we knew he was destined for something great." Then she glanced at me and smiled. "But Stephen's here too," she said as an afterthought. "He's finding his way, and that's okay." The room laughed politely. I didn't. That night I left before dessert. I didn't say goodbye, didn't leave a gift, just slipped out while the DJ played Sweet Caroline and my relatives screamed, "So good, so good, so good." I got into my car, drove back to my place, and stared at my laptop screen. We had just crossed $10 million in ARR, and no one knew. Not yet, but they would soon. When I say I went off the radar after that wedding, I mean it. No calls, no texts, no Facebook likes. I stopped replying to the occasional just checking in message from Mom, and I ignored the group chat completely even when my cousins tried to loop me into some awkward birthday greetings. I told myself I was too busy, and I was. But the truth was, I didn't trust myself not to explode if I had to hear one more patronizing comment about how Evan's always been the leader, or "Stephen, you've got your own path, sweetie." I didn't want a path. I had a damn highway, and they were too busy polishing Evan's driveway to notice. But silence wasn't enough because even when I went quiet, they didn't. It started small. Mom left a voicemail asking if I could help Evan with some technical stuff. She said it like I was the family IT guy. I think her exact words were, "You know, the computer things. He's having trouble syncing some files on that cloud thing." I didn't respond, so Evan emailed me. Yo, it said, "No, hey, no, how are you? Just yo. Claire's laptop is stuck on some update screen. Can you look at it? No, please, no offer to pay, just the assumption that I was available and obligated to fix things." I blocked his email. The next time I saw them was at Thanksgiving 7 months after the wedding. I hadn't planned to go. I really hadn't. But part of me, the foolish, still wounded part, thought maybe things would feel different now that I was older, wealthier, and more in control of my life than I'd ever been. I didn't go to show off. I just wanted to be seen for once. Big mistake. Dinner was at my parents' house, and nothing had changed. Same peeling wallpaper, same centerpiece Mom bought from the dollar store 6 years ago and insisted was rustic charm. Evan and Claire arrived 20 minutes late, fashionable of course, and Mom greeted them like they'd flown in from Paris. Me. I got a nod, a literal nod. The food was fine. Turkey, dry potatoes, lumpy, but the tension, immaculate. Every time I tried to speak, someone cut me off. Every time Evan opened his mouth, the room turned to listen like he was reciting ancient prophecy. He told some story about a golf game with his boss, and Mom actually clapped. Then Dad launched into this tale about how proud they were of Evan's new financial management initiative, which I'm pretty sure was just him making a new spreadsheet at work. I said, "That's great," and went back to eating. But the real blow came after dessert. We were sitting in the living room, half the family asleep in armchairs, football humming quietly from the TV. Claire was showing off photos of their honeymoon Italy, of course, and Evan turned to me casually like we were old friends. "So what have you been up to, little bro?" I blinked. "Working?" He raised an eyebrow. "Still freelancing?" "Something like that," I said, keeping my tone flat. Mom cut in from across the room. "He's doing little app things, I think." "Aren't you, honey?" I stared at her. "I run a software company." She laughed. "Oh, Stephen, you always make it sound so fancy." "It's real," I said. "We just hit our first major milestone." Dad looked up. "Milestone?" I shrugged. 91 million in valuation. The room went silent. Claire paused mid-scroll. Evan turned fully toward me now, the smugness wiped clean off his face. "Wait, what? We had our Series B 2 weeks ago," I said. "Raised a good chunk. We're expanding globally now." Mom blinked. "Stephen, that's not possible." You never even studied business. I studied problems I said. Then I solved one. That's how companies start. I wasn't even trying to be smug. I just wanted a moment. A moment where I could say something real and not have it reduced to a joke or shrugged off like I was still some awkward teenager. But that moment never came. Because instead of all our pride, I got suspicion. Dad leaned forward. So, you're saying you're a millionaire? I'm saying the company is doing well. Evan scoffed. And yet you drove here in a Toyota. It runs fine. You expect us to believe this? Mom asked, her voice sharp now. Stephen, this isn't funny. It's not a joke, I said. I built something from scratch. I didn't tell anyone because of exactly this. You always had a habit of exaggerating, Dad muttered. And just like that, the conversation ended. They didn't ask questions, didn't ask how I did it, what the product was, what it meant to me. They changed the subject. Someone made a joke about the turkey being dry and the room laughed, and my $91 million truth was buried beneath gravy and deflection. I left early again. But the silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't peaceful, it was strategic. Because the next time I heard from Evan, he wasn't asking for tech help. He was asking for money. It was a text, no greeting, just, yo, you got like 10,000 I can borrow. Claire and I are looking at a house. I didn't reply. He sent another the next day. You there? Just alone. Parents said you're doing well now. That made me freeze. They told him. I hadn't realized how fast the news would spread. I thought the awkward Thanksgiving would just fade like all the others. But apparently, once they accepted it was real, or at least possible, they decided it was theirs to share. I wasn't a son to be proud of. I was a resource. Mom called 2 days later. Stephen, sweetheart, she said in that tone that always meant she wanted something. Evan told us about the little chat at Thanksgiving. I just wanted to say we are proud of you. We just didn't know you'd done so much. I said nothing. And listen, she continued, about your brother's house. He's a little short on the down payment. It would mean the world if you could help. I don't think that's a good idea, I said flatly. She sighed. Stephen, it's family, and it's not like you're hurting. I hung up. She called again the next day and the next. Then Dad joined in. Your brother needs a hand, he said. It's not like he's asking for much. You're in a position to help, and we're asking as your parents. I didn't ask you to pay for my apartment when I was eating ramen every night, I said. Where was the family then? That's different, he snapped. You chose to be stubborn. Evan's building a life. It hit me then clear and hard that they didn't see me as a person. Not really. I was a tool. A backup plan. A walking ATM with a quiet voice and no boundaries. And they had no shame. A week later, I got a group message from my mother. Another family gathering. A barbecue this time. My cousin was graduating and we were all expected to bring a small financial gift to support his college plans. Mom added, Stephen, maybe you could cover the catering, as your way of giving back. No one asked if I was coming, no one cared what I wanted, they just assumed that I would fund things, that I owed them, that I still played the same role, the quiet one, the background character, only now with a bigger wallet. I didn't go. That summer, Evan posted a photo on Instagram. Him and Claire standing in front of a new house. Caption started from the bottom, now we here. My blood ran cold because I recognized the house. It was one I had toured myself a few months back when I was house hunting as a kind of therapy. It wasn't listed anymore. Sold, the agent had said. Full cash offer. A small part of me hoped it was a coincidence. Until the second photo. Claire's wrist. A new Rolex. Same model I had bought for myself the week after our Series B closed. The price, $16,000, and I hadn't even worn mine yet. I scrolled back through the photos, my stomach tightening. New car, renovated kitchen, designer furniture. It added up, way more than Evan's job could justify. Then I checked my accounts, and my heart stopped, because one of my private wallets, one I used for transferring investment gains, had a withdrawal. Not huge, not big enough to notice unless you were tracking closely. But it was there, $3,000. Transferred out 2 weeks before Evan's house announcement. I scrolled further. Another transaction. $5,000 this time. A different wallet. Same week. Then one more. $4,000. Different dates, different platforms. And all of them connected to the same secondary email. One I didn't recognize. But I knew who it belonged to, because it was a Gmail handle I'd seen before. on a shared Netflix account. Evan. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, my fingers numb. He hadn't asked me for money. He had taken it. And my parents, they either knew or didn't care. Either way, something in me shattered. Because this wasn't just favoritism anymore. This was theft. And that was the moment the line was crossed. Not just between us as brothers, but between me and the family I thought I could one day win back. No more. That night, I opened a private doc and started typing. Not notes, not plans, blueprints. Because if they wanted a villain, I could be one. But I'd be the kind that smiled in silence. And burned everything down while they toasted marshmallows over the ashes. When I tell people I've hit rock bottom before they assume I'm talking about college. Broke ramen diet, living in a crappy apartment with paper-thin walls. But that wasn't it, that was just noise. The real bottom came after I realized my own brother had stolen from me, and my parents either knowingly or blindly had let it happen. That's the kind of pain that doesn't make a sound. It just settles in your bones and sits there heavy. For a few days after I found those transactions, I couldn't work. I couldn't even open my laptop. I'd sit at my desk, the same desk where I'd spent years building something from scratch, and I'd stare at the screen like it had betrayed me too. I kept rereading the transfer logs, checking my security settings, trying to piece together exactly how Evan had gotten access. He didn't have the passwords, but he must have had something. A saved login from an old family device maybe. Or maybe he'd watched me, once remembered an email, got curious, got lucky. However he did it, it wasn't just the money. It was the presumption that he could take from me and I wouldn't notice, that he deserved it more than I did. And worse, that no one would take my side if I confronted him. I tested that theory. I called my parents' voice flat and measured. I think Evan's been in my accounts, I said. I found several transfers. They're traceable. It links back to an old email he used. Silence. Then Dad. Are you sure you didn't just make those transfers and forget? I almost laughed. You think I misplaced $12,000? Mom jumped in. Maybe it was a business expense. You've said before you use lots of apps and tools. Maybe one billed you. I triple-check everything, and even if I didn't, it wouldn't link to Evan's email. More silence. Finally, Mom sighed. Stephen, honey. Evan wouldn't do that. He's not a thief. I was quiet for a long time. And if he did what then, she didn't answer. She didn't have an answer. And that was the confirmation I needed. They didn't just fail to believe me, they refused to. Because if they admitted Evan had done something wrong, it would shatter the entire narrative they'd built. Golden child, family man, responsible firstborn, and they couldn't afford that. Not even for me. So I hung up. And for the first time in my life, I realized I had no family. Not really. Not in the way that mattered. I remember lying in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, thinking, what's the point of building an empire if the people you love think you're disposable? That question haunted me. For weeks, I moved on autopilot. I took meetings, nodded at investor pitches, signed off on design changes. But I wasn't there. I stopped going to the gym, stopped cooking, let my place get messy. I even let my beard grow out, which might not sound like much, but if you knew how obsessively I shaved every morning before work, you'd understand what that meant. It wasn't depression exactly, it was emptiness. Because I hadn't built that company just to make money. I'd built it because I thought it would finally make me enough. Enough to earn their respect. Enough to be seen. But now that I had it, the numbers, the headlines, the growth, all it had done was make me a bigger target. A golden ATM with no withdrawal limit. At one point, I even thought about selling. Taking the money, disappearing, changing my name, buying some quiet cabin in Oregon and going full ghost mode. But then something weird happened. I went to a coffee shop. That's it. Just a normal day. I needed air, needed something to pull me out of the fog. I brought my laptop, told myself I'd answer a few emails, maybe reorganize our internal dashboard. The shop was noisy. Some college kid was doing a Zoom call too loudly in the corner, and a toddler was melting down over a muffin. But somewhere in the chaos, I heard someone say my name. Not Steven, but my company name. Yeah, my team just on board with Oxen. That platform is wild, saved us like 12 hours of setup time. Their UI is so smooth, it makes Google Docs look like Notepad. I turned. It was a guy in his late 20s, business casual, talking to what looked like a client. I didn't know him. He didn't know me. But he was talking about my product like it was the most normal thing in the world. I just sat there and listened. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something shift. I wasn't just a ghost behind a screen. I'd made something that mattered. Something real. Something useful. This guy didn't care that my parents thought I was the family screw-up. He didn't care that Evan had stolen from me. All he knew was that oxen made his job easier, and that was enough. That moment didn't fix everything, but it cracked something open, so I leaned into the work, not as a way to prove anything anymore, just to build, to refine, to evolve. We just rolled out a new AI-based onboarding assistant, and the beta feedback was glowing. I dove into the next iteration, obsessing over every detail. I pulled long nights not out of burnout, but out of flow. I reconnected with my co-founder Mira, who I'd been unintentionally ghosting during my spiral. She didn't pry, didn't ask why I'd gone dark. She just sent me a dot gif of Gandalf returning to Helm's Deep and said, "You good now?" I smiled. Getting there. We hired 3 new engineers, brought on a consultant to prep for our Series C. I started taking interviews again, podcasts, tech blogs, even a segment on a startup YouTube channel with over 1 million subscribers. For the first time, I let my face be associated with the product. No more hiding. And something wild happened. People started messaging me. Old college friends, former coworkers, even a few distant cousins who had never bothered to speak to me at family reunions. They weren't asking for money. They were saying things like, "Dude, I had no idea that was you," or "I've been using Oxen for months. It's brilliant." I let those messages in, let them replace the ones I'd been obsessing over. I started working out again. Nothing crazy, just light runs, home workouts. I got a haircut, cleaned my apartment, cooked a real meal. One night I even invited Mira and a few team members over for dinner. We drank cheap wine, made terrible jokes, and stayed up talking until 2 a.m. And in that moment, I realized something. This was my family now. The people who saw me, who respected me, who didn't need to compare me to anyone else to know my worth. Still, there was a bruise under it all, a quiet ache that never fully left. I hadn't forgotten what Evan did or what my parents didn't do. And even though I was rebuilding, even though I was stronger now, part of me still wanted something. Not revenge, not exactly just truth. I wanted the truth out in the open, not buried under holiday greetings and fake smiles. I wanted them to know that I knew, that I saw them clearly now, that their version of reality, where Evan was the hero and I was the broken one, was over. And that's when I started planning. Not a petty scheme, not a dramatic takedown, something quiet, something undeniable, something that would force them to sit with the truth for once. It started with a visit to a lawyer. I didn't tell anyone, not Mira, not my team, just me and a notebook filled with transfer logs, screenshots, and old emails. I walked into that office with a folder under my arm and a storm in my chest. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Talia, took one look at my notes and said, "You've got a case." "I don't want to press charges," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Then what do you want?" "I want proof. I want a record. I want something they can't spin. Something they see every time they try to lie about it." She nodded slowly. "We can do that." It wasn't about money. I'd already recouped the stolen amount tenfold in stock value that month alone. This was about narrative, about removing the mask. Talia helped me draft a letter, not a cease and desist, not a demand for repayment, just a formal acknowledgement, one that laid out the facts, named names, and stated that the matter was documented, that it wouldn't be pursued legally for now. We mailed it to Evan's address, certified signature required. 3 days later, I got the delivery confirmation. And 10 minutes after that, my phone started ringing. Mom, Dad, Claire, then Evan. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I poured myself a drink, sat by the window, and watched the city lights blink. They knew. Finally, they knew. And it was only the beginning. When I was younger, I used to fantasize about revenge in the dumbest ways, getting a big promotion just to throw it in their faces, showing up to Thanksgiving in a Lamborghini. You know, movie moments, flashy, loud. But after the letter, after the calls, I ignored, and the silence that followed, I didn't feel the urge to be loud anymore. I didn't want them to grovel. I wanted them to understand. To look around one day and realize everything had shifted, and they'd been too busy polishing Evan's shoes to notice the floor falling out beneath them. But to do that, I had to be methodical, strategic, precise. And I had to play the long game. The first step, control the narrative. Not publicly, not through some dramatic social media post. No, I didn't need the world to know what happened, just them. And more importantly, I needed them to feel powerless to stop it. Which meant I needed to get closer before I pulled away. I started with Evan. After weeks of ignoring his texts and calls, most of which, to be fair, had dropped off after the letter, I finally replied to one message. "Let's talk." That's it. No emojis, no context. He answered in seconds. "Dude, yes. When and where I suggested a bar downtown. Not too fancy, but upscale enough that he'd feel comfortable wearing his new Rolex, the one he bought with my money. I arrived 5 minutes early and got a booth in the back. He showed up late, of course, like he always did. Still had that confident walk, the same smug half smile. But there was a tension in his shoulders I hadn't seen before. He was trying to look relaxed, but I could see the panic bleeding through his shirt collar. He slid into the booth, glanced around, and gave me a forced grin. "Man, been a while, huh?" I nodded. "It has." Silence. He leaned in, lowered his voice. "Look about the letter. You got it." Yeah, I got it. He rubbed his hands together like he was washing guilt off them. "I didn't mean to steal anything, bro, seriously. I thought it was an old account. I just needed a little cash and saw it still had money in it. I didn't think it'd matter." "You didn't think stealing would matter? I didn't know it was stealing at the time. I swear, He looked away, swallowed. I was desperate. "For what?" "A Rolex and a down payment." He flinched. "Claire was pressuring me. We were trying to get a place before the market jumped again, and Mom said you were doing well, so I figured—" He stopped. He figured that I'd be fine with it, that I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't matter. "I didn't come here for an apology," I said. He looked confused. "Then why are we here to give you a choice?" That got his attention. He straightened up. "A choice?" "Yeah. You repay me with interest quietly, no drama, no excuses over time, or I escalate." His lips parted, but I raised a hand. "And before you try to bluff, I have everything. Logs, emails, IP addresses, timestamps, and a lawyer who's very good at making noise." He stared at me for a long moment. I could see the gears turning. I knew Evan well enough to know he wasn't truly sorry, just cornered. Finally, he exhaled. "Okay, fine. I'll do it." I nodded. "Good." But he added quickly, "Don't tell Mom and Dad." "All right. They'll freak. It'll tear the family apart." I laughed. Not loudly, just a small, bitter chuckle. "I'm not the one who tore it apart, Evan." I left him with the repayment plan in writing a document my lawyer had already prepped. Monthly transfers, reasonable amounts, just enough to sting. He signed without reading it carefully, typical. But that was just step one. Because now that I had him where I wanted him, cooperating, silent, and nervous, I could move to step two, rewriting the legacy. For years, every family event had been about Evan. His career, his wedding, his life. I had been background noise. And if I wanted to change that dynamic, not just for revenge, but for closure, I needed to become undeniable in their world, on their turf. So, I started small. I sent my parents a gift. It was a framed newspaper article from a local business journal. Nothing flashy. Just a clean layout. A photo of me, face finally public, and a headline. "The quiet tech founder changing how teams work globally." Below that, an editor's note. Oxen Software, founded by Stephen L., just hit a valuation of $91 million after closing its Series B funding round, positioning it as one of the fastest-growing startups in the onboarding automation space. I didn't include a note, just the article. A week later, my mom texted me, "Got your gift. Didn't know you were in the news." "That's impressive. Impressive." From her, that was a whole monologue. Then a few days later came the next surprise, a dinner invitation. Not a group thing, just me, Mom, and Dad. We'd love to catch up, just the three of us. I accepted, and I planned everything. I showed up 15 minutes early, reserved the table, chose the restaurant. A quiet Italian place in the city, tasteful, expensive, but not flashy. The kind of place that says, "I belong here," without screaming it. I wore a simple tailored suit, no watch. No jewelry, just confidence. When they arrived, they were clearly flustered. I don't think they'd expected me to look so composed. Mom hugged me awkwardly. Dad offered a handshake. We sat. They made small talk about weather, traffic, a cousin's baby. Then came the question, "So your company?" Dad said, clearing his throat. "Tell us more." "We didn't realize it was doing so well." I smiled politely. "It's been a good few years, a lot of hard work." "I just wish you told us sooner," Mom added. "We felt left out." I paused. "I didn't think you were interested." She blinked. "Of course we were." I tilted my head. "Mom, last Thanksgiving you said I was finding my way after I told you about the business." She looked down at her menu. "I'm not trying to make you feel bad," I said. "I'm just being honest. For a long time it felt like you only saw what Evan did right and what I did wrong." Dad shifted uncomfortably. "That's not true." "It is," I said calmly. "But I'm not here to argue. I just want you to know that I'm doing well. I'm happy, and I'm not the same kid who needed your approval." That landed hard. They didn't argue, they just sat with it. And for once the silence wasn't dismissive. It was thoughtful. I didn't mention Evan didn't bring up the money. I wanted that to stay separate. This dinner wasn't about guilt. It was about establishing new boundaries, new rules. After that night, I started attending family events again. Not everyone, but just enough to be visible to remind them that I wasn't hiding anymore. And when people asked what I was doing these days, I told them without shrinking, without apologizing. And slowly, I began to shift from Evan's brother to the one who built that software company. It helped that Oxen was everywhere now, startups, HR blocks, even a sponsored segment on a national podcast. My name was out there, my face, my story, and it wasn't long before my parents started bragging about me. The same people who once scoffed when I said I was coding now boasted to their neighbors that I led a global team. They didn't fully understand what I did, but they knew it mattered, knew it was big. But that wasn't the end goal. That was just groundwork. Because now that the narrative had shifted, it was time for step 3, the reveal. Not to the world, to them. I waited for the perfect opportunity, and as fate would have it, it arrived, gift-wrapped. My cousin Danielle was getting married. Big event, fancy venue, full family guest list. The kind of thing where everyone showed up dressed like it was the Oscars, and everyone talked about everything except the couple. I knew Evan would be there, I knew Claire would too, and I knew they'd be smiling. But behind that smile, panic. Because he still hadn't finished paying me back, not even close. And every month when that transfer hit my account, he was reminded that I had him on a leash. But this time, I was ready to take it further. I was going to say something. Not publicly, not with a microphone, just carefully, strategically enough to make everyone stop and think enough to finally pull the mask off. But what I didn't know, what no one knew, was that someone else was watching too. Someone who had their own score to settle, and they were about to hand me the perfect weapon. The wedding was held at a vineyard about 40 minutes outside the city, the kind of place with white linen tents, a candlelit aisle, and an open bar that didn't skimp on quality. Everything screamed tastefully expensive. And of course, Evan showed up in full peacock mode, tailored navy tux, his hairstyle to perfection. Claire on his arm wearing a designer gown that probably cost more than most people's rent. He spotted me before I even stepped onto the gravel path leading to the ceremony space. "Steven," he said, voice dripping with fake warmth, arms open like we were long-lost siblings in a Hallmark movie. "Didn't think I'd see you here." I smiled and gave him a polite nod. Family event. Wouldn't miss it. Behind the mask, I saw the flicker of nervousness. He hadn't seen me since our little bar meeting. He'd missed 2 repayment installments in the past 3 months. No explanation, no warning. I didn't remind him. I didn't have to. He was already sweating. Inside the reception hall, things unfolded the way they always did. Long speeches, polite clapping, endless rounds of, "Aren't you going to settle down soon?" directed at me by distant relatives who barely remembered my last name. I sipped my wine and kept my head low. I wasn't here for a social hour. I was here for the final act. What Evan didn't know, what no one in my family knew, was that I hadn't come alone. Across the room, at a table near the floral arch, sat a woman in her late 30s, calm, composed, and perfectly out of place among the chiffon and pearls. Her name was Lydia. She was a forensic accountant, a very good one. I'd hired her 6 weeks earlier. After Evan missed his second repayment, I decided to dig deeper. Not just into him, but into the web he'd woven. If someone like Evan had no shame in stealing from me directly, what else had he been getting into? What else had he convinced others to look the other way? On the answer, plenty. See, Evan had been managing the family trust, a modest fund left by my grandfather to cover things like education, emergencies, and long-term care for extended relatives. The money wasn't massive, but it was important. It helped my aunt during cancer treatment. It paid for my cousin's grad school. It was sacred. And Evan, he'd been draining it. Small transfers, reimbursements for expenses with no receipts, fake invoices. Lydia traced every dollar. Over $78,000 gone, all routed to accounts linked to Evan's name or Claire's. And the best part, he had no idea anyone was looking. I waited until after the cake cutting, after the champagne toasts, after the dance floor had started to fill with relatives, awkwardly swaying to 2000s pop songs. That was when I made my move. I approached Evan near the bar. He was laughing with one of our uncles, drink in hand. "Can I borrow you for a second?" I asked. He raised an eyebrow but followed. I led him to the side patio where string lights cast warm glows across the empty tables. Music thumped quietly behind us. "What's up?" he asked, already guarded. I handed him a manila folder. He frowned, opened it, and began to read. Page after page. Every transfer, every account, every timestamp, Lydia's cover letter summarizing her findings. His face went pale. "Stephen," he said, his voice small. This is ridiculous. This is taken out of context." I stepped closer, voice even. "You didn't just steal from me, Evan. You stole from the family, from Aunt Marlene, from Danielle's college fund, from Grandpa's legacy." I can explain." "No," I said sharply. "You won't, because you won't have the chance." He looked at me panicked. "What does that mean?" I handed him a second folder. Inside was a prepared statement of resignation from his position managing the trust, a formal letter admitting financial misconduct. Not legally binding, but emotionally devastating. The kind of thing that would end any goodwill he had left with the family. He shook his head, trembling. "You wouldn't." I tilted mine. "I already have." His eyes widened, and that's when I stepped aside and gestured to the door behind me. It opened. Lydia stepped out, but she wasn't alone. Behind her was Aunt Marlene, Danielle's mom, and my cousin Jonah, the one Evan had mocked years ago for choosing teaching over finance. They'd seen it all. He staggered back, face red, words failing. "No," he muttered. "No, you don't understand. It wasn't like that. You don't get to explain." Marlene said, voice cold. "You get to listen." And listen he did. We didn't yell. We didn't insult him. We laid out the facts, calm, surgical. Then Lydia handed him the final document, a restitution agreement. Every cent he took from the trust, he'd pay it back or face legal action. Evan's knees buckled slightly as he sat down on the edge of a planter. He knew he was finished. I walked away after that, didn't need to stick around for the fallout, but I heard it was dramatic. Claire left the wedding early in tears, apparently. Rumors spread like wildfire. By the next morning, half the family knew. And by the end of the week, Evan had been removed from every family group chat, blocked on 3 social media platforms, and quietly disinvited from my parents' anniversary party. As for my parents that came next, they called me several times. I ignored the first few. Then I answered. It was my mom. "Stephen," she said, her voice raw. "What happened at the wedding? Is it true, all of it?" Silence. "Then why didn't you tell us?" "You never listened," I said. "Why would I keep trying?" I heard her crying. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't hate her. But I didn't comfort her either. Because it wasn't my job anymore. "We want to fix this," she said. "No," I replied. "You need to fix yourselves. I'm doing just fine." And I was better than fine. In the months that followed, Evan kept his head down. The repayments resumed, this time larger and on time. My parents began asking real questions about my work, not performative ones, genuine curiosity. It wasn't perfect. It never would be, but I was done chasing their approval. I'd become something they never expected, not just successful, whole, and I didn't need their spotlight to shine. A year later, I made a quiet donation to a local school in my grandfather's name, the same one Evan had siphoned from. They used it to build a new computer lab. I never told anyone, not even the family, because some victories don't need applause. Some are better lived in peace. I stood in that lab during the ribbon-cutting ceremony, watching kids play with programs I'd helped fund, building things from scratch, dreaming bigger than I ever had at their age. And I smiled. They'd asked me once, "When are you going to be someone like your brother?" The answer, never. Because I became so much more, and they finally knew it.